Welcome, everybody, to Rucks Balls and Oval Balls, everyone's favourite fan-based rugby podcast. And yes, we are back for episode 12. Episode 12. Rory, I know you're there, and we've got a bit of a French flavour this week. How excited are you?
Bonjour, monsieur. Bonjour.
Bonjour, monsieur. Ça va bien. Half of the Rucks Balls and Oval Balls team is coming to you from a hotel lobby in Paris.
Oh, yeah.
But before we get into the mundane banter that will dig around in that area, let's play our favourite song.
Rucks, malls, and oval balls, union their domain. Lots of rugby knowledge, but their banter is mundane. Rory answers questions, David has his stats. Two former front row voices, the fan zone, Colin Flats, the DPR VAR. Welcome, more jouet, fling it wide, out the back, alley, alley. Alley, alley. R-M-O-O,
Every single time it gets the hairs on the arms up, it gets me excited to get to the podcast. I don't know about you, Rory. I'm not bored of it yet. Are you bored of it yet?
I don't know if I'll ever get bored of it. Every single time it gets me up for it.
Correct answer. Well, first of all, as always, mundane banter. Now, Rory, I feel like you may want to just paint a picture of where you are. Before we get to mundane banter, tell us about your surroundings, because you're coming to us from absolute bizarre surroundings from what we're used to here.
It's our mob's most exotic location to date. I am, and I can't stress this enough, walking distance from La Défense Arena.
Wow.
I could conceivably go and see that hallowed pitch, apart from it being locked up because it's a Tuesday.
Well, that is exciting, Rory. I don't envy you, having to do some corporate fun out in the continent. But I'm glad you're kind of expanding the reach of the podcast to our French cousins.
The reality is La Défense is basically Paris's answer to Canary Wharf. So visually, it's not actually that exciting. But
it's what's inside that counts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
boots on the ground. That's what we needed.
Fantastic. Absolutely, yeah. It's about time our mob did a bit of outreach, and I'm really glad that you're extending the arm to the French quarters that exist amongst the rugby faithful. But anything else going on, Rory, in mundane banterland?
We'll get into what I got up to on my weekend a little bit later on in the podcast, I expect. But another weekend of cracking rugby, so lots to talk about. I don't think we should waste any time.
I agree, and mainly because I haven't got anything mundane to talk about my weekend, because it was just absolutely exciting and riveting, but I'll save that for another day. This podcast, we got a lot of rugby to cover. We're going to talk about Premiership rugby coming back. We're going to go through the games and talk about what we've picked out in a few of those moments. And obviously, the Women's Six Nations kicked off this weekend as well, and we'll do a little summary of that. And this wouldn't be a normal podcast without our stable visit to the DPRFR and maybe a question or two with some answers. How does that sound, Rory?
Sounds marvellous. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, next time, maybe you could take over the roles next time. But yeah, absolutely. Let's get cracking.
You're doing a grand job. You're doing a grand job. I think you should keep doing it.
Thank you very much. That was the feedback I was looking for. Premiership rugby has kicked off again, round 12, after a long period off. Should we get straight into some of these games? Because I think there's a lot of talking points to be had here, and one that I'm not overly excited about digging into too much, but the Friday night fixture at Franklin's Gardens, Northampton versus Leicester. A tricky watch for a Saints fan.
Yeah, and I have to say, as a non-Saints fan, but also a non-Tigers fan, a bit of a strange watch. I mean, no secret, Saints have been pretty up and down this season. You know, that's well documented. But this was as down as they've been. I can't think of a worse performance they've put in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. To get nilled at home by your local rivals, that's pretty low. And the performance that kind of went with it, I think I was looking at the stats earlier. I think Northampton Saints conceded 29 turnovers, which I don't think I've ever seen that number. I don't think I've seen that number that high.
It's ludicrous.
It's ludicrous.
And to be honest, it was quite ludicrous to watch it. I mean, we won't break it down play by play, but I think some bits to highlight would be actually the way the game started, very helter-skelter.
Yeah.
But Leicester's first try, Pollard putting Radwan in. I mean, Leicester had 3 attackers against 7 defenders, and they all found a way to get round Saints. Sloppy.
It's very sloppy. I think it was very, very apparent that Leicester were a team that had a warm-up game the week before. They were perhaps... I don't want to use the Six Nations as an excuse, because Leicester would have had players missing, Northampton had players missing, but Leicester looked like a team that was coming off the back of no break in the Six Nations. They looked fresh, they looked like cohesive, they were working together, they had a game plan, they stuck to it, it was a smash and grab. Northampton looked like a team that hadn't played rugby for 6 or 7 weeks and didn't know what they were doing, at least certainly for the first 20 minutes.
They looked really, really poor. I mean, the Jack Van Porfleet try, which is an excellent finish, the chip and chase, but his little snipe down the side of the ruck, where I'm not even entirely sure who made it. I think just several people made mistakes. Certainly Tom Pearson didn't cover himself in glory in that first half with some of his defensive reads. They threw 3 intercepts in the first 12 minutes.
Yeah, Hanro Liebenberg just seemed to be in the way.
Also Liebenberg, yeah.
So one thing I do want to kind of credit Leicester with is, so they've brought in Dave Kidwell, the new defence coach, to kind of interim cover the gap that Matt Everard's left. And I think there's a little bit here of a touch of his work, because I think he's identified something in the Saints game plan where there was, if you ignore their first kind of picture that they present in their attacking phase and attack the passing lane that gets created behind it, there are intercepts to be had. And as all the Saints players seemed to be half a second off the pace, it was so easy to break down the Saints' attack play, get in the way. They got 3 interceptions. Very frustrating to watch as a fan. I don't think a single Saints player covered themselves in any glory. You can see with George Hendy, a player that we absolutely adore on this podcast, he just had one of those nights where everything went wrong. You could see it when one of those balls that he dropped on his face, he's like, it's just one of those nights. We've all had games like that where you try to catch a high ball and no matter what you do, you drop it. He just had one of those nights, and I think a lot of Saints players, we've all had one of those careers. But George Hendy, I'm hopeful it's just like a one night yips rather than something that could become a thing. But like I said, I'm not pointing fingers at an individual, because I think across the board, Saints were not at the races. I think the only thing that I could say positively is that after the first 20 minutes and probably the next 30 to 35 minutes, Northampton at least shored up their defence a bit and looked probably a bit more attacking, but if it wasn't for the fact they kept dropping everything. Henry Pollock made a huge impact coming off the bench.
Yeah, I think this is good. This is a good thing to slightly dwell on with Pollock. So a massive impact when he goes. So when I looked at my notes, what I put in for Pollock was Pollock inspiring a comeback ? Because in his first couple of interventions were basically making breaks. It was basically involved in 2 disallowed tries. A little unfortunate from that perspective, but I immediately followed that with gave away the 4th. Because for all of his endeavour, he did then catch whatever disease was going around the Saints team that day. Lost his hands trying too hard, threw the ball, and put Leicester in for their bonus point try. So I think it's just a weekend to forget for Saints. I don't think it's one that Saints need to dwell on. It's just one of those days where it's all gone wrong, everything's gone wrong. And actually, what we should probably do is turn it around slightly and just praise some of what Tigers did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kevin Borthleet was absolutely electric.
Yeah,
he's really coming back into some serious form off the back of a couple of good outings in the Six Nations, and he's starting to look the player that many have thought he could be. So really good from him. And then I thought the big point of difference was Tigers' kicking game.
Yeah.
So Pollard, Ollie Hassel-Collins, I thought had a very good kicking game. Freddie Stewart had an incredible kicking game. Freddie Stewart really looked good in this game, I thought. It's one of those where basically everything went right for Tigers in the first 25 minutes. They pulled 3 tries and then coasted until they got the bonus point quite late on. Saints, very poor.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think it's a performance worth dwelling on from a Saints point of view. It's just one of those that it's double annoying because it's Derby weekend and it's the bragging rights, but sometimes these things happen. I can tell you from experience, these bad Derby games do happen.
They do happen, and all the noises coming out of the club are the right noises from Northampton's point of view. They accept it wasn't good enough. They accept that they need to bounce back. I fully expect a reaction against Sale next weekend. But yeah, I think ultimately, as you say, it's one for a Saints fan, a Saints player to forget. The performance isn't going to get remembered fondly by anyone at Franklin's Gardens. But as I said, the game ended with Northampton getting 0, Leicester Tigers getting 33 points and a bonus point at Franklin's Gardens, which they will be absolutely chuffed with, very pleased, and quite rightly now have the bragging rights of the East Midlands. Moving on to Newcastle versus Sale, the Battle of the North.
Yeah, interesting game, this one. Newcastle, I think, showed all the qualities that you and I have talked about, what we admire about the Falcons.
Yeah.
Real endeavour, great continuity, never gave up, got the try right at the end of the game to, put a bit of mustard on their side of the scoreline. But ultimately, totally outmuscled by a Sale outfit that were the best in the world, can outmuscle the best of them, really, when it wants to. Sale was so physical in their defence that they were just forcing Newcastle into simple errors that, even in a struggling Newcastle side, you wouldn't necessarily expect. And forcing Falcons to kick the ball away in attacking positions because they couldn't find a way through.
Yeah. I think a lot of sides.
It's an Al Sanderson side. They're built from the defence up. And it was one of those days for him. Yeah,
absolute textbook Sale Sharks performance. A lot of teams would have struggled to deal with that physicality on that day. They turned up and they really put a marker down for kind of don't forget about us. They are still in the equation.
Yeah, 100% they are. I thought, what I did think watching Newcastle was I thought that's a team that is at the very least saying, if you don't turn up on it physically, we're gonna give you a real go. So I think there's a bit of a marker laid down by them from that point of view, but they're just going to fall down on the fact of they can't really match other teams pound for pound.
Yeah.
From a Sale point of view, George Ford was unbelievably good. Absolutely world class. The Carpenter try with the sort of Dupont-esque, basically it's sort of a box kick. He basically plays 9, drops back half a step, very Dupont-like, and then puts in this. I mean, landing it on a sixpence doesn't really do it justice. There's quite a tight ground at Kingston, very small dead ball area, and he lands it so perfectly for Carpenter to just dive on the ball and finish it. It's fantastic, and he was. Because George Ford plays to the line so well, and he's so dangerous playing to the line, he really ties together that Sale back line. Yeah. It looks such a different outfit with him in it.
Yeah, I think because defenders you can't take your eye off George Ford when you're defending him. Yeah. It opens up those fractional gaps for those big, lumpy ball carriers to go find a weak shoulder. And I think you can tell when George Ford is playing, Sale are just a little bit better just across the board.
Absolutely. It really brings Tom Roebuck and Joe Carpenter in the game, and something you've identified, Marcy White.
Marcy White, the man who seems to have been forgotten in the English centre equation, who 3 or 4 years ago was a bit of a standout for the England under-20s, and kind of he's gone away, worked on his game. He's been up in Sale for a couple of seasons now. He was at Wasps previously, and I think he spent a little bit of time at Exeter as well. So he's kind of moved around a bit, trying to find a home. I was incredibly impressed with that performance, and it's a name that I was conscious of, and I'd kind of always had in the back of my mind. And I thought we need to add him to that equation of exciting young English centres.
He looks like one who's really now developed physically. I thought the same about Joe Woodward actually for Tigers, who looks like he's put on quite a bit of muscle.
Yes.
But yeah, no, Muscle, he's really developed physically. You know, he was always a physical player, but actually probably without the weight to back it up in the biggest collisions. But he's now got that real heft behind him. He cuts really good lines. He's quick. He's got good hands. He's a very committed defender.
Yeah.
You know, I think he's one that England will be looking at in the summer as an option.
No, yeah, I agree. I definitely think he may have been forgotten about by some, but I don't think he'll be a forgotten name for that much longer if he carries on playing the way he does, especially if he nails down that Sale inside centre berth kind of long term, kind of fill that void that Tuolangi might have filled in the past. Obviously, they've let go of Naifa Levu before he really made a chance, so they must have a bit of faith in him because he seems to have something about him. And in general, as you say, Joe Carpenter had an excellent game, George Ford. The Sale pack, as always, is absolutely monstrous and dominant in every way. Tom Roebuck, great game. So overall, very positive performance for Sale Sharks, and like alluded to before, Northampton are looking to get a reaction to their first game against Sale up at the AJ Bale. That's going to be a hard game for Northampton to beat Sale in this form.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where with Sale, you are relying on having a bit of an off day, and to be honest, you're sort of relying on them not having George Ford.
Yeah,
because it makes such a big difference to how threatening they are. You know, I remember when Gloucester beat them at King's Own, and really one of the main reasons we did was because their attack was so one-dimensional. You throw Ford back into that,
adds multi-dimensions when he's there. But the game ended 39-15 to Sale, so Newcastle able to get 2 scores on the board. One for Karen Neild, one for Richard Palfreman. Good to see a prop on the scoreboard. But likewise, Sale Sharks getting 5 or 6 themselves kind of throughout the team. Really strong performance from them. So let's not write off Sharks when it comes to the end of the season equation.
No, they're right in the mixer for me.
Right in the mixer. Newcastle, I think, plucky performance. Some good individual performances, but again, it's the sum of the parts just doesn't quite stack up to some of these other Premiership teams, and that does equate to some performances where even if they play as well as they can do, it won't be enough against some of these more physical sides. And I think that's what we saw this weekend. But there's still some glimmers of hope in that. There's some good talent coming through at Newcastle, considering the backdrop of the news. Joe Davis looked good, yeah.
A really exciting young 9. I thought he sped things up really nicely for them. If he can get some pointed runners coming off him, there's something happening there, I reckon.
Yeah, and I think there's a good player in the likes of Freddie Lockwood. He looks pretty handy in the back row. Yeah. Like there's some good things in there, and considering the backdrop of like some of like relatively negative news stories coming out around Newcastle, putting that performance, credit to him. Yeah, because I'd imagine it's been quite hard to concentrate up there with the noise that's going on. Moving on to, I'm really interested to get your view here, Rory, because as we touched on at the start, you had some activities over the weekend, and I believe one of your activities on the weekend was centred around this next match, Saracens versus Quins at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
Absolutely, yeah. I was lucky enough to be offered a ticket quite last minute to go to this game, so trotted along to Tottenham. And,
obviously, always willing to take up any tickets offered to him. Classic Rory.
Yes, I like freebies, sue me. But I took the opportunity straight away. Always say yes. And headed up to there quite enthusiastic. I was pretty optimistic about watching an exciting game. You know, Saracens came with a strong team.
Yeah.
Quins, probably a slightly weaker outfit. But, you know, they're always good for a good game. And, you know, Derby Day weekend, you expect fireworks.
Yeah. For the listener, Rory just grimaced.
Yeah. Okay, so I thought this was a bit of a damp squib, if I'm honest, as a spectacle. The atmosphere in the stadium was poor. I mean, there was 55,000 there, but you wouldn't have known it. So it was pretty dead in the stadium itself.
Do you know what I find interesting? That's a drop of about 9,000 compared to last season's showdown in the same stadium. It's really not what I expected as a bounce off of the Six Nations.
No, I mean, I suppose partly It's not been a very competitive fixture in reality for a while. I mean, it's the first time Quins have won away at Saracens for something like 14 years or something.
Yeah.
It's it's a long time since Quins have actually won that one. Part of me thinks Saracens' marketing isn't the strongest. I think that's part of it for me. They, for a team that's won so many trophies in recent years, and okay, there's a lot of controversy behind it,
A little bit.
but they still seem to struggle to attract a larger loyal following.
Yeah.
But a lot of kids there. There's a lot of local rugby clubs. A lot of Essex rugby clubs went. I know Saracens have got the catchment area, so
Yeah.
a lot of clubs that I recognised: Southend, Eton Manor, Billericay, Rochford. A lot of Essex rugby clubs were there. But the game wasn't. I didn't think it was very good, and maybe I was a bit, dampened by the atmosphere on it.
Yeah.
Sarri's got a couple of quick tries, really off the back of some poor Quins play. Don Brown basically just threw the ball to Saracens for their first try to go to the other end. And in the first half, Quins really didn't fire much of a shot.
No.
I didn't think. They were lacking ball carriers. They could really tell they were lightweight compared to Saracens. But they did change it in the second half, and I thought the turning point was when they brought on Benson at 10, who was not a player I knew. I have to say,
Very little about him, yeah.
Yeah, really hadn't come across him, but he absolutely. Jared Evans in the first half really struggled to steer that team. Benson came on, and he was the absolute game changer. Ben Waghorn scored a really nice try as well, off an Oscar Beard break. Will Porter scored a really nice try.
Yeah.
So in the end, Quins got over the line and won it. As a spectacle,
Not great.
Not the best day I'll ever have at a game, but
It seemed to me, fair play to Quins, especially coming back from being 12-0 down. It's good to see a side able to respond to getting nilled in the first half. I do think it's another scenario, and this is just my observation. Some may accuse me of having a bit of an anti-Saracens bias, and I'm fine with being given that label. But the box kicking after box kicking after box kicking, it's so boring, and I've said this before as well. If you're to look at Saracens, if you take away Juan Martín Gonzalez and Tom Willis, they would have nothing in terms of go forward.
Well, I mean, they still have Ben Earl, but...
So he wasn't playing, was he? And I was thinking, if you're thinking of centre partnerships, which centre partnership, if you were building a club, would you pick? Would you pick Nick Tompkins and Alex Ozovsky, or would you pick Ben Waghorn and Oscar Beard?
Yeah, look, I mean, without wanting to dig out two good players in Ozovsky, who's had a very good season, and Tompkins, who's a very storied Welsh international, the issue is, basically what you've identified there, that Saracens don't seem to be ambitious enough with the ball. For having, I probably think they've got a better team than maybe you do, and maybe that is a lack of anti-Saracens bias, but that you can't deny that they're not overly ambitious with the ball, and they've had flashes this season where they've played some really good stuff, but they do default to a very structured, quite conservative game plan very quickly.
I think they're over-reliant on those two players, and they're over-reliant on a box-kicking game from Ivan Van Zale with a really strong kick chase that just didn't exist in the game, that particular game.
I think if I was being... I'm going to try to be as diplomatic about this, because, again, I don't want to dig out individual players too much. I do think that Saracens would benefit from a more expansive scrum half option to speed up their backline, because Fergus Burke, to me, seems like a player capable of playing a much more expansive backline. And that might be a bit of Crusaders rose-tinted sunglasses I'm wearing there, but seems to me like it's a bit of a waste having a 10 with that kind of ability behind a box kick.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to the centres, you've also got to remember, I mean, they're missing Cinti at the moment, who, as a centre option, is a lot more dynamic.
Yeah.
And Alex Good didn't start, obviously. He
came on for Shegan.
Yeah, it's difficult. I think some freshening up in that Saracens backline would do it the power of good, but to me it does come down to the strategy. It just feels like they're willfully not attacking opportunities at times.
I agree. It'll be interesting how I'm not writing off their season. I've still predicted them to get in top 4 somehow. But next season, Max Maylin's returning could be a difference maker because I think they need a player like that.
Yeah, it feels like having someone like that at fullback who's got a bit of a counter-attacking instinct would make a big difference to them.
But also, let's not take away from the fact that Harlequins' reaction in the second half, led by Jamie Benson, with a side that, let's face it, on paper was significantly less experienced and less storied than the Saracens side.
Absolutely, yeah.
To get the comeback and then to take away the losing bonus point as well in those closing moments with Will Porter's try, credit to him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will be accused of anti-Quins bias by more than one friend of mine who is a Quins fan. But, I think what Quins do well that maybe is a lesson for Saracens to take is they do look for their most exciting players. So Oscar Beard, they got more out of it. He looks more and more like a player that is really deserving of more of an international shot. They try and bring in Iskro as much as they can.
Yeah, Nick David looked good as well.
Yeah, Nick David looks really excited. Tyrone Green, we know, is an exciting player. Ben Waghorn's looking week on week like a more exciting prospect and one to keep an eye on. So, yeah, fair play to Quins. They try and maximise their attacking potential when they can, and it does come unstuck for them sometimes, but when it works, it's really, really exciting. The first half was a pretty poor spectacle all round, and Quins didn't help them, so they're pretty inaccurate.
Yeah,
and they looked like they were losing the physical battle quite drastically. But Jamie Benson comes on, slots a couple of penalties, ties up the back line, gets the momentum going, and they turn it around. And fair play. So rather killed the atmosphere. There was a group of lads sat behind me who were with Oakland's College, which is one of the sort of feeder schools into Saracens, and their moods just getting more and more damp as long as the second half went on, digging out Saracens players who they claim to know on first name basis.
Well, obviously,
it's quite entertaining to hear them screaming at them for not running with the ball.
Well, I'm not going to judge any factors of the Saracens crowd and fan base, but that does happen when you have these big events in large stadiums that you're trying to attract new fans to. Maybe you get all sorts of fans there, which can be a positive and a negative. But to summarise that game, the damp occasion that it was, Saracens 12, Harlequins 23. As I said, taking away the losing bonus point from Saracens, the first time they've beaten Saracens in a long, long time. Completely shifted up the makeup of the table, dropping Saracens down to join Northampton Saints in the bottom half of the table. It's making some interesting reading for the run-in, at least, if we're looking at a positive. Right. But if we're to transfer for what was maybe a bit of an underwhelming occasion, let's move on to Bristol versus Exeter. Yes, you are quite right to be blowing the hypothetical flames in front of you, Rory. Yeah. What an absolute gorefest.
A humdinger in old-fashioned parlance. It was so much fun to watch.
It was.
Much prefer to have gone to this game. And actually, both teams can take a lot of credit for it, mostly being completely optional in defence for large periods of the game.
Yeah, defence was optional.
Is the kickoff the new set piece? You saw it a bit in the Sale Newcastle game. I'm not sure if drop kicks are getting more accurate to hit space or teams just aren't practicing catching them enough.
I think what we're seeing is the laws around the kick chase is having an effect, and teams receiving a kick are being considerably more cautious about having blocking players in front of the catcher. And I think what we're seeing, teams are figuring out ways to take advantage of that. And I think Bristol assessed that quite quickly, that if they just drop a kickoff right to the edge where there's normally a winger standing to catch it, and you get a tall, quick second row, which is basically Bristol's model for second rows, there's immediately a mismatch, and they're able to get up enough steam to cover that ground because there's going to be no blockers in front of them. So it's definitely a tactic that's being worked at. They tried it a couple of times, and it worked.
I worked it out. Was from my notes, not retaining kickoffs led to 6 tries in the first 15 minutes.
The fact there was 6 tries in the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, 1 or 2 of them completely directly. But I mean, Van Rensburg,
yes,
Werner Janssen van Rensburg, literally just caught it from the kickoff and ran it over the line.
Yeah, that one was a weird one because that one just looked like Exeter just forgot that they were supposed to catch it.
I mean, But I mean, 6 tries in the first 15 minutes coming from kickoffs. Honestly,
Unheard of.
I hadn't anything. It looked a lot more like basketball than it did Premiership rugby. But I'm all here for it. Bristol's ability to get speed of ball to the width.
Yeah.
Is it Jack Bates? I mean, notoriously bad with first name.
Correct. Jack Bates. Yeah.
Excellent. Again, not another player I've seen a huge amount of previously. He's got wheels.
Yeah.
Got some really good lines. The first try was just all about Harry Byrne getting the ball to the width as quickly as possible. And he looks a real player in that Bristol side. If I was them, I'd be working out a way to keep him around.
Yeah.
Obviously, with his brother off to Gloucester.
Interesting storyline there, potentially. Yeah. I think what we're seeing here is a Harry Byrne that's had a bit of time with this team to kind of get his head around the Bristol Bears way of playing.
It's tying it up. He does a very similar job to what McGinty does for them.
Yeah.
He's sort of the voice of reason.
Yeah. The sensible one.
The sensible one. And there's a lot of little moments that we should talk about, but I do want to just touch on Exeter Chiefs.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, I have been accused of not being very kind about the Chiefs this season.
No way.
And that's fair. I've been willfully cruel. Their defence is still a leaky sieve.
Yeah.
But to be fair, against Bristol,
most teams
that
are.
can happen to anyone.
Yeah.
In attack, however, they look much more threatening. Getting more width, more movement at the line, more dynamic ball play at the line. I thought they looked vastly improved. I mean, even from their Premiership Rugby Cup outings, which flatters to see on more than one occasion, they looked a lot more threatening in attack and a lot more dynamic. The try worth watching, if you haven't seen the highlights, Beck, is Josh Hodges.
He had a great game.
Great. The pass dies on him and he volleys it, recovers it, goes around. It's a fantastic bit of skill. No, I mean, the note I made was I pulled a hamstring watching it.
I pulled 2 quads.
Yeah. Ben Cohen as well, I thought. Is it Ben?
Ben Cohen, Premiership debut.
Yeah, he looked very comfortable in that 10 shirt for Chiefs. Other than the kickoff, he looked very, very comfortable in that shirt. He looked to the man aboard in my eyes. Yes.
Just a quick moment as well for Henry Slade receiving what looked like the hardest hit I've seen this season from Bill Matter.
It was comical. It looked like a cartoon boxing match. He just went horizontal immediately.
Like, I was so annoyed that the TV replays didn't do 10, 15 more reruns of that tackle in slow-mo.
Well, find the clip online, David, because I did 10, 15 more clip watches of it very quickly afterwards. It was fantastic. Bill Matter, who's a player I've liked since his Edinburgh days, but he did some great stuff with them. He is so much fun to watch, and he was really busy in this game on both sides of the ball, but that hit was brutal.
Exactly, absolutely. C'est magnifique. But on Exeter, so again, Paul Brown-Bampo looks good. Will Rigg, I thought, had another good showing in the centres.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm impressed by him. I think it's a bit of a learning curve when you step up from the Championship, isn't it? But he looks like he's found his feet now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said, Josh Hodge, he's always had this exciting element to the way he plays. He had quite a bad injury around 12, 18 months ago. Hasn't quite found that form again, but I'm starting to get the sense that maybe he's getting that confidence back. Maybe we're starting to see glimpses of what is potentially a very special player in Josh Hodge. It's definitely one to kind of keep an eye on. Yeah, Ben Cohen, great debut for a young fly half up against Bristol, who are just throwing every angle under the sun at them. Fair play, and they got their own bonus point of their own. Although saying that
they were good for it. One of the players I want to highlight was Ogre, who is, he's well known for being an exciting, dynamic hooker. In that kind of mould that Bristol really like, very like Harry Thacker as well. Yeah. One thing I thought watching the game of the weekend was actually what a good nuts and bolts player he looks now.
Fundamentals.
His line-out darts are really good. He's doesn't look like a weakness in the scrum. He hits all his set pieces, his rucks, his mauls really well. I just thought there's definitely something here because he's hitting all the nuts and bolts that you want from a hooker, as well as having that that dynamism and that excitement, pace and power that you want in the loose.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it must be quite a tricky gig being a forward in Bristol because the backs get all of the plaudits. I've been saying for a long time, if you look at the Bristol's kind of forwards, their locks, so James Dunn and Joe Owen in this game, they get through a lot of work. Joe Batley, although he's injured, gets through a lot of work. Gabriel Ogre fits in that mould. He's also got that explosiveness to his game as well, where he can absolutely eat up meters the same way Harry Thacker does. And then you got the likes of
so many of those Bristol players were out on their feet by then. They put in a big defensive shift.
They did. Yeah, there was one particular phase of play where I thought Bill Matter may actually just stop running and just walk because he just didn't have any more energy left in his legs.
Just expire.
He just looked absolutely knackered. But as a neutral in this game, I was absolutely enthralled. I even found myself in the second half thinking, why hasn't there been another 12 tries? I was spoilt in the first half. I hate to say it because personally, and again, I'm not going to make any fans saying this, I think Ashton Gate is one of my least favourite grounds to go and watch rugby at. Not because of the team or the way that rugby sport, I just don't think it's a very good rugby stadium. But the quality of rugby they put on show there. And I will add, in favour of Bristol Bears, seeing their season ticket prices they've announced for next season. Get down there if you're in Bristol area, because that is exciting stuff to go watch.
Oh, yes. Well worth your time going down to watch. Yeah.
You're not going to get any nils going there very often anyway. But to summarise, the 90 points were scored, so it ended 52-38 to Bristol. Tries on tries on tries on tries. Jack Bates with a hat-trick. James Williams picking up 2. How good was James Williams, by the way? Another English 12. Never thought of, never comes up in discussion.
He was great. He's been good for them all season.
He has, and he is another one of those glue players that we spoke about in other weeks. So lots of good stuff to be excited for in the Bristol area, and I'm still backing them to get a top 4 spot come the end of the season. I thought the McGinty injury may have a bit more of an impact than it has. Burns come in and has been an absolute success. I can see why they signed him up for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Now, going from that high, Rory, let's talk about a game that maybe you don't want to dwell on too much. Or maybe you do.
No.
I think there is some positives here as well. Bath versus Gloucester. Give me your cherry and whites perspective.
Okay, I'm going to be totally magnanimous, and I will say that Bath deserved to win this game.
Yeah.
Pains me to say it. I don't like saying it, and I want to say it again.
Sorry,
Bath deserved to win this.
Sorry, the audio dropped out there, so you might have to say that again.
Okay. You shut up.
Damn it! I thought I tricked you.
Not quite. Okay. What I am going to say is it's a lot easier to look like you win this game when you have 16 people on the pitch.
Okay. Back up your claims.
Okay. All right. I'll slightly row back on that. Some of the refereeing decisions left a lot to be decided from a Gloucester perspective. Just off the top of my head, Tom's a toilet try. He knocked it on. That was very clear from the camera footage. That everyone could see that. Don't know why the TMO didn't say anything. They come in for everything else. Why not mention that Tom Satoy definitely didn't have the ball in his hands and actually didn't get to the line anyway?
I definitely did see that in live, so I was surprised that didn't go back to the TMO.
Yeah. The other one, Tom Dunn. The ball has to leave your hands if you're taking a tap penalty, right? You can't just sort of touch it with the heel of your boot and run on. You can't just do that, so maybe let's address that at some point. I mean, the breakdown, we didn't get a sniff, and it's already hard enough. You're up against Guy Pepper, and then Sam Underhill comes on.
Yeah.
I mean, help us out a little bit. Give us some of the decisions with you. We've just got nothing.
Yeah.
But that Bath squad is undeniable.
Yeah.
Unless you're up in front of Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, in which case you have to deny loads. But
I made a note here that the Bath bombs strike again. The bench came off, and just like some teams, there's a drop off when the bench unloads onto the pitch. That sentence painted a dirty picture in my head. Let's scratch that. I just pictured all the Bath bench dropping trowel and doing their business on the pitch. Moving on. Some teams, when they empty the bench, there's a drop-off in performance and a drop-off in intensity. Bath, it's the other way around. They bring players on, Yako Kurtzy, Sam Underhill. Yeah, it's unfair.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's Half time, 28-26, apart from one slightly unfortunate charge down from Will Muir.
Yeah.
From under the post, which, I mean, let's not check the starting blocks, but fine. These things happen rarely, but sometimes they do.
At least Alfie Barbary kicked the ball off to give you another chance.
Exactly. Alfie Barbary saw sense and realised it was time for a bit of fair play. Gloucester scored some really, really nice tries.
Yeah.
Clement was superb. Santi Carreras.
Try
Santi,
before you buy.
Why are you going to Bath? I'm going to miss you. Brilliant. He was brilliant. Afa Fasolban, really good to see him back. Throw in a lovely pass for who scored that try?
So it was George Barton one? No, that was later
try.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. Gloucester's discipline was poor. I mean, they didn't get much of the rubber going from the referee, but they didn't adjust, and they gave away too many penalties. A bit back and forth in the scrum, but certainly struggled. Beno Abano got up on Afo a couple of times. Thomas Toy definitely did a job on Kieran Knight.
Yeah.
Val Rapava-Ruskin came on and shored things up, and the scrum looked a lot stronger. But the first half, the scrum did struggle. But the Bath pack it's just this unstoppable force, just of rolling momentum, and it's difficult. It's difficult to find a way to square the circle with Bath, because ultimately you feel like you've done a job for 40 minutes, and then they bring on Will Stewart and Jaco Kazir and Sam Underhill, and suddenly you're going, oh, what are we going to do here? Guy Pepper was absolutely everywhere. Bath were very well seasoned, but
I like it.
Gloucester were very dogged in defence in the second half and held on pretty much as much as they could, and limited Bath probably well short of where they should have been given the amount of ball and territory they had. But look, at the end of the day, going to the wreck against that squad is a fool's errand at this point. You just can't. You can't see a way where you can overcome that squad at the moment. And at this point, Bath look like they're shoo-in for the title to me.
They do. I think the only thing to note, and this is credit to Bath, that they've covered up the fact. So Ollie Lawrence is obviously out for the remainder of the season. Max Ojomo again looked every bit the quality player we've been talking about over these last few weeks. Joe Thokanasiga injured as well. So they got a couple of key injuries that they're managing to manage. Rory McConaughey looked quite physical. He's, again, a player that's kind of been forgotten about, because he's kind of been the third, fourth choice winger at Bath, where they've been very reliant on Will Muir and Thokanasiga pretty much the entire season. Finn Russell, for me, had one of the best games I've seen him play in a Bath shirt for a long time.
He did. He was brilliant.
Where has this Finn Russell been? Because that wasn't the same Finn Russell I saw in a Scotland shirt.
Well, if we're being honest about it, the Bath pack's better than the Scotland pack.
Yeah, that platform.
To be honest,
he has that platform
It's a platform.
One hell of a platform.
Yeah, I think everyone will make jokes about the Bath squad for the rest of the season, and I don't intend to stop. But what you can say is they have put something together at the Rec that is, if that's not a title winning squad, I don't know what is.
No, you do wonder. I struggle to see a side that will be able to beat them in a final setting, man for man. I think the only thing I do have with Bath in my brain is, I think in the backs, another injury or two, they're struggling. But some of their forwards they can play in the backs. Like Ted Hill can't even get a start for Bath. Still kind of reserved for a bench spot.
God bless Ted Hill. The man deserves more.
He does. And the scary thing is, I think if they get any more injuries in the centres, we could see a centre partnership of Josh Bayliss and Ted Hill, and I think it would still work. They'll
probably still score 40 points. I don't see why not.
Yeah, so
Finn Russell will put them in.
But Gloucester got try bonus point.
Yeah, which we could be happy with. I think actually in the end, probably a bit disappointed not to get both bonus points.
Yeah,
probably had the opportunities all in all, but I said it before we got into this weekend in last week's pod. Gloucester got a tough run of games post Six Nations. They got to play Bristol at home this weekend, and then after Europe, then we played Saracens away. They've got to come through that with as many points as possible, and if they can do it with something like 8 points, maybe 10 points, then they'll still be in the mix for the top four. But if they come away with 3, 4, 5 points, then top four chances can go in pretty quick in this league as it is at the moment.
Are you willing to put to the archives of the podcast your prediction of does Gloucester make the top 4 this year or not?
I think we will. The reason I say that, as much because of the inconsistency of the teams around us as for us, I think Bristol have got very good away form, but I'm still going to back us to win at Kingsholm against Bristol. Sale, I'm not convinced yet, although that could change depending on who they get back from injury and, obviously whether George Ford plays the rest of the season.
Yep.
Quins are pretty up and down. Saracens are pretty up and down, although they are Saracens. Northampton, I don't see making much of a comeback at this point.
Yeah, I think you can rule them out.
Tigers, I don't know why. I still remain unconvinced by Tigers, and I don't know why I still remain unconvinced, because they do keep winning games, and they were very good on Friday, but something doesn't quite add up for me there, and I still think they're fallible.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree on Tigers. I think my prediction for top 4 is Bath, Saracens, Gloucester, Bristol. I think that's my prediction.
I'm not sure it'll be that order, but
yeah,
yes.
Maybe not that order. Although Bath will almost certainly be top.
Bath will top it. Bath will top it. But yes, I think that would probably be my prediction. But again, I wouldn't rule out Quins, Tigers, or Sale making a charge for it. But I just think they've all got they've all got as much chance of falling right away as they have of making a charge, in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we'll see how the rest of the Premiership goes through. We've still got a bit of Europe to contend with, but we're firmly getting into the run-in. There's, six rounds of fixtures left, so we're definitely coming to the business end of the competition. But that game itself, at the Rec, Bath won 42-26, so Bath taking 5 points, Gloucester go up the M5, or whichever route they take, just with 1 point in their pocket. But as I said, the table itself has become a little bit interesting, I'd say, mainly down to the Saracens result. Let me just have a look. So we've got Bath up and away, 6 points clear of Bristol in second. Bristol then got 5 points clear of Leicester. And then it starts getting really congested. So between Leicester, Quins, Gloucester, Sale and Saracens, there's 6 points in it between third and seventh. So there's still a tremendous amount to play for in the competition. So if you are listening and you're, for whatever reason, you're listening to a podcast, you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to stick with Premiership Rugby. Stick with Premiership Rugby, because there's still a lot to go on. Every game counts, as Rory said. And we're here for it. And we're going to be watching. Now, Premiership Rugby wasn't the only rugby going on this weekend.
It was not. There are 2 competitions going on at the moment, and the other one threw up some results, I thought.
It did. The Women's Six Nations kicked off, and there were some really, really interesting matches. So it kicked off with Ireland versus France. Now, on paper, to the less informed rugby fan in women's rugby, may think this is going to be a galactic battle between 2 of the top teams in rugby. I think the reality is that in women's rugby, Ireland are not to the same level as the men's team. They're a little bit behind where the French team is.
Yeah, they haven't quite developed their women's team as much, right?
Not yet.
I thought I saw strides. What did you think?
Oh, there's definite strides. So there's definitely a handful of really exciting players that the Irish team have. So Aoife Wafer, what a player she is.
Great pick for me this week.
Great pick for you. Yeah, so fantasy rugby wise, every team who's in like the top half of our league, they all had Aoife Wafer, and I'm not surprised the teams at the top had her captained. I think she's a must-have in any fantasy team, because she delivers game in, game out for Ireland, both sides of the ball. Niamh Jones and Linda Jugang, really good in the set piece in the front row for Ireland. But ultimately, this was a game where the French class prevailed, even though they went down to 14 women.
Vernier was a slightly more mixed bag pick for me, although she did get the try. Why do you think Ireland struggled to break France down while they were down to 14, but not when they were at 15?
So I think sometimes when you're down to 14, a team can rally. Your focus changes. Like when you're 15 on 15, you're looking for mismatches, you're looking for gaps in defence. When you're down to 14, you know you're covering someone, and I think it kind of galvanised the French a bit in defence.
Yeah,
and I think Ireland tried to force it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean it does. Yeah, it does have that effect sometimes, but feels like a missed opportunity for Ireland.
It's a missed opportunity, and I think it's worth noting that I don't think Ireland would have been expecting to win this game. On paper, the French team is just a stronger side, but a lot could be taken from Ireland. They kept the game competitive. They really did stick it to France various points in the game. They picked up a few tries. France didn't look the cut above that I thought they were going to look, which I think is credit to Ireland.
Yeah.
I think what we saw was that France just had a few bits of organised, well-structured play that they took advantage of, and they kicked their goals. I think that's probably one thing on the Irish side that they're a little bit weak on, is their goal kicking.
It's one of those things, I mean, it's one of those things that women's sport gets criticised. People will fixate on these little things that they want to criticise women's sport for. I think what people forget was how bad goal kicking was in men's rugby before the game went professional.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you go back and watch goal kicking pre-plastic tees,
Yeah.
I mean, it's hilarious. The England team in the 70s were notorious for it. They barely ever got a kick.
Yeah.
So it's one of those skills that actually comes quite late in terms of your development of players, in terms of as a whole setup, as a system. So I don't think if you're an Irish fan and you're thinking, why have we developed a goal kicker? Look, it's a skill that's very specific, and it will come. That player will arrive. Actually, having a system that develops all-round quality players is more important, and it looks like those green shoots are coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said. Like for me, if Aoife Wafer was on the winning side, probably one of the best players on the pitch by far. I think Marie Menager for France looked really dangerous as well. And the fact that Ireland kept the French 9 as Bourdon's hand or something along those lines, like she's really, really dangerous in broken play. So the fact they kept her quiet, like there's a lot of good stuff to take away as an Irish women's rugby fan. So hopefully, I think it stands them up well for kind of going into the next round of fixtures where they're playing against Italy. I think they've got a good chance of getting a win there. But that game itself, so Ireland didn't get the win, didn't get any points, but it ended 27-15 to France. Respectable from an Irish perspective. France still getting the bonus point and kind of keeping that on track to kind of... Oh wait, my mistake. France didn't get the bonus point. France getting 4 points, 3 tries scored, 27-15. Now, Scotland versus Wales.
Fair.
Very tight affair. So before this game kicked off, Scotland were 1-8 favourites to win this game. So that should give a bit of perspective of what was expected from this game and how it should have fared. I think what we've seen here is an instant impact of a new structured defensive system put in play by some chaps we've spoken about before on the podcast. Sean Lynn and the defence coach, whose name escapes me, but apologies, who's been brought in as well. Their impact was clear and obvious.
Look, I think with the Welsh women's team, they have been through the ringer as a squad in terms of their dealings with the WRU. Some pretty disgraceful stuff has gone on there. And if you go further back, some of the bullying and misogynistic claims and all the rest of it, there's a fairly dark story behind a lot of what's happened with the Welsh women's squad. But what's really pleasing, I think, for rugby fans, Welsh rugby fans in particular, is that the talent is rising to the surface, and they are now starting to find a way to leverage the what it still is in many ways the national sport of Wales to bring women into the game. Poorly misjudged tweets by
Neath
notwithstanding. I think as the Welsh side professionalises further and they are able to work more with Sean Lynn and they develop their setup a bit more, I think you'll see them being a really competitive outfit in the Six Nations. And I think you'll start to see the green shoots of that very quickly. But also, Scotland should be credited with maybe being a bit further along that process and having doubled down on women's rugby and producing already what is a very strong team.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Scottish team have a number of really exciting players. Their back three is electric. I thought Rolly, let me remind myself of their back three quickly.
Rolly, Lloyd and McGee.
Yeah, so the back three of Rolly, Lloyd and McGee was so exciting to watch. They were breaking tackles for fun. They looked really, really elusive and dangerous to watch. Their centre partnership of Emma Orr and Lydia Thompson, really, really physical. Some really good basic skills. And then Helen Nelson of Loughborough Lightning, absolutely steering the ship. So, like, their backs are a really solid place. And then in their forwards, they got some really, like, strong performances. Sarah Bonner in the second row. They had, at the number 8 shirt, a player that I was really, really excited for getting me lots of fantasy points, and then to go and get themselves a red card. With
let you down a bit there.
A little bit of let down of Evie Gallagher. But I think there's a number of good performances from Scottish side there. But is there something in women's rugby? Because, and I'm drawing attention to this because my fantasy team had 3 red cards in it.
Yeah, I had 2.
Is there something in the women's game where, for some reason, there seems to be more cards getting banded around? I don't know whether it's a skill thing, a technique thing, a refereeing quality thing. But it felt like inevitable that each game was having cards. And it shouldn't feel like that.
No, it's probably for a much deeper stato than myself to make a call on this. I wouldn't want to make an unjudged call on it because I think one of the dangers is, and again, this is something that women's sport suffers on more than men's sport. People make sweeping statements based on isolated incidents. They judge the whole sport by it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be seen to do that. My honest gut feel is because the game is often a bit looser in terms of players trying things and trying to do something slightly different to break the game. With the laws as they are, you probably are a bit more in danger of copping a high shot because, there's a lot of jinky players.
Yeah.
So in a tired defence that's chasing the player that steps back in, you are in danger of chucking in a stray arm or shoulder or face or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So I'm loath to make any sweeping statements based on isolated incidents because, I do think women's sport suffers from that more than it deserves to. So I won't go any further than that, but I suspect that this will equalise out. And let's be honest, it's not like the men's game is short of red cards at the moment.
Very true. Very, very true. I do think this also exposed the flaw with the 20-minute red card rule because Georgia Evans got 2 yellow cards, which meant 10 minutes off for the first yellow. And then because it was an upgraded yellow to a red, it became a 20-minute red card. Meant that her penalty was 30 minutes off the pitch before someone new could come in. Evie Gallagher's red card, 20-minute red card, probably a more cynical, dangerous bit of play. Scotland only suffered 20 minutes of a player being down.
Yes, well, it wouldn't be like rugby to implement a law that was simple and easy to follow for everyone, would it? So I suppose we have to accept these things sometimes, but probably something that the lawmakers need to put their gravy tyres on and iron that one out.
Yeah, they probably didn't expect there to be an incident where there'll be 2 yellow cards quite so soon. And also, as I said a couple of weeks ago about the Blair Murray jumping into a tackle incident.
Well, yeah, this is an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, exact same thing happens as I said would happen and didn't get penalised. World Rugby, just give us consistency. That's all we ask.
Let us know what it is.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. This one was probably worse than the Blair Murray one.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I don't know. Who are we to expect consistency in the game, David? I mean, we're just two
humble blokes,
2 old props.
Yeah, to be fair, we should really be careful what we ask for. But as I said, so this was a really tight game, and the bookmakers had this one being far more one-sided in Scotland's favour. But it ended 24-21 in the end. So Wales coming away with a losing bonus point. Some real positives to build off from their side. I think Sean Lynn's had a real good impact. And his stock will only have grown as a result of this. Scotland, though, getting the win, starting off the Six Nations strongly. Then we move on to England versus Italy. Again, bookmakers, I think that they had this one as a 55-point win for England on paper.
I wonder whether the bookmakers took into account. John Mitchell was very clearly trying to do something with this squad as a whole, right? He's trying to make sure that he's got options and different ways of doing things.
Building depth, building options, which is what he needs to do.
And for my money, all his calls paid off on this one. Players really put their hand up. Emma Singh and Mia Venner, two players that we highlighted from the PWR final.
Yeah,
both looking absolutely ready for that level.
Yeah.
Mia Venner in particular, I thought. Holly Aitchison looked pretty comfortable at 12.
Yeah,
dual playmaker role, that was quite an interesting call.
Yeah, I thought that worked really well.
Yeah. No, I was pretty all round. I was pretty impressed by the England side. Cabello, when she came on, getting a try, I actually picked her as my super sub. That worked out quite well for me.
I wondered how you flew up the scoreboard.
Yeah. Given that I had 2 red cards in my team, I did remarkably well.
I had 3, and I still finished top 10.
Yes. Yeah. No, all told, I was pretty impressed by this as an England performance. It's what I would deem a professional performance.
Yeah, I think the first half they put Italy to the sword a bit in the first half, and they left a number of tries out there. They had quite a few kind of overturned by the TMO, so there was a few where it's kind of a ball getting dropped over the line. Like, as a Northampton Saints fan, I'm not going to criticise the England side for dropping a few balls.
If you were going to level a criticism at this team, then it would probably be that they probably need to be more ruthless.
Yeah.
And put teams not just to the sword, but really keep putting them down.
Yeah. But I also think Italy, credit to them, second half...
Stuck at the task.
They posed problems for England, and I think we saw their defensive systems really standing up firmly to what Italy were presenting. Because Italy do have a number of really exciting players. So, like D'Inka, who's normally a winger, was playing at outside centre. She's always tricky. So I think England will be pleased with how that game ended. And as you say, so I think Mia Venner really showed up well on the wing. Emma Singh shows that she is a very, very, very good option to have there if for whatever reason we want to try someone other than Ali Kildun. In the forwards, I think Amy Cockayne looks incredibly feisty in the hooker shirt. We know what we get with some of the other back rows, like Marley Packer. Like you know what you're getting with her. I think John Mitchell's happy.
Options.
It's options. Yeah. Claudia McDonald on the other wing looked really exciting as well.
Yeah.
It's hard to come away from that game with any negatives. I think you've said it yourself. It is that ruthlessness that is perhaps the one lacking element.
But maybe what you'd mitigate for that is if you were putting out maybe what on paper is the number 1 team for England, maybe that team is utterly ruthless, and this one being a little bit more of a scratch side, bit of an experimental side, you probably do lose a bit of that ruthless edge with players maybe overplaying to prove themselves and put their hands up for selection. So maybe that balances itself out. With that. But
I also want to put a huge thank you out there to John Mitchell for only bringing Ellie Kildun on for the final 5-10 minutes, because a lot of teams had her as their super sub. I didn't gamble for that. 20 points is quite expensive for a super sub. Thankfully, didn't leave enough time for her to really rack up a huge amount of points for everyone. So John Mitchell, I'm very, very thankful. As I said, so the game ended. So it wasn't a 55-point stuffing at all, but it ended 38-5 to England. Bonus point win. Starting off the tournament as they probably intend to carry on, and they'll really want to put a stranglehold on this and finish where they start at being top of the table, going into next week where they have probably a slightly trickier assignment against Wales at the Principality Stadium. I think another point I want to make is that I was quite pleased to see they took the game to York. They played in York, a really good turnout, I thought. From what I can see.
About 9,000. Yeah. No, I think fair play to the RFU, and it's not something we'd often say, but they're using the women's team to really market the game well, I think, and actually probably that will end up paying some dividends for them, particularly if they end up chucking out a Twickenham at some point with their row with Richmond Council. But no, I think it's a really good move by them, a smart move by them to do that, and they should keep taking the women's teams different parts of the game and saving HQ for maybe the games where you can guarantee 40, 50, 60, 70, 80,000,
Yeah, and it's a criticism that's been handed to the men's side occasionally, how they aren't taken around the country. I often applaud the women's game for not falling into the same pitfalls that the men's game has done in the past. So, yeah, again, not that we're always ones to credit the RFU, but I don't mind it. But that's the Six Nations, Rory. You know what that means now. It's time. Our El Presidente is on a diplomatic visit to another nation to get his address to the nation from France. Bonjour, El Presidente.
Bonjour, mes amis. Yes, welcome to this week's DPRFR, brought to you from the diplomatic holdings, Palace on the Road. I don't know, whatever, however you want to phrase it.
Yeah.
A quieter weekend for the DPRFR.
Yeah.
All in all, not so many obvious heroes, but there were two moments of real DPRFR quality that are worth highlighting. And I think it's time for us to expand the cultural backdrop of the nation and highlight some of our true artists and the ones who add a bit of colour to greyer days. So this week we're going to be highlighting Bevan Picasso Rod and Afolabi Michelangelo Fasogbin.
Oh, I think that might be his actual middle name.
There you go, brilliant. Almost as if I researched it. For two moments of true artistry. Bevan Rod with a try against Newcastle that would, if the number on his back had a 2 or a 3 after the 1, it would have looked about right. A little just soft drift on the pass, a shimmy of the hips, and sprinting into the corner to finish it off. Mwah! Oh. Pure pageantry. Loved it.
El Presidente is pleased.
Bevan Rod is a player that I've been very impressed with over the last 12, 18 months. And he's a player that I'm hoping will get his recognition this summer, because I think he's made great strides in not just the nuts and bolts of the game. I think he's a pretty fierce scrummager at the moment, but his all-round gameplay is just superb to watch.
Yeah, he does. He has that other element to his game, doesn't he?
Yeah,
absolutely. Welcome Bevan Rod to the DPRFR.
But in addition to Bevan Rod,
2 for 1.
Afo Fasogbin with, I want to say 10 metres, but let's exaggerate it, 500-metre pass.
Yeah, that's about right.
To the wing for George Barton to run it in for his try. It was magnifique.
Oh.
It was great. I had to see a 6'5" tight end prop catch the ball, give it and go, and throw a lovely over-the-top loop pass to the wing to put someone in for the try. It was fabulous. And he's a player that, I mean, firstly, very pleased to have him back from injury for the run-in, because he's vastly improved. He looks like he's, in the time he's been spent injured, spent his time toning up, getting his fitness. He looked much more cut than he did before.
Very lean,
around his upper body. So it's a scary prospect if he's got even stronger than he was before.
Yeah.
But if you couple to that, him being able to finally bring in some of those elements of his all-round gameplay into the adult game that he showed when he was in the under-20s, he is a frightening prospect. And he looked, from that pass alone, like a player ready to really burst onto the scene. So, for 2 moments of true artistry, Bevan Rod and Afo Fasogbin will be inducted into the Cultural Council, the Ministry for Art. They will be commissioned to paint presidential portraits and conduct presidential art fairs and all that sort of cultural outreach we do to hide the vast ways of poverty that we're not dealing with.
Oh, it's good. I'm really glad to hear that you're thinking outside the box with this DPRFR analogy that we have ongoing for 12 weeks now. I'm really, really glad that you're still finding new ways to make this fun and exciting for everyone.
It's and listeners, do tell me if I'm overstretching the metaphor. That won't make me stop.
No, if anything, it'll embolden him to carry it on even more. But yeah, absolutely, Bevan Rod, Afo Fasogbin. Bon oui. Wait, what's bon oui in French?
Good night.
I think. Bon chance. Très bien.
Very
Afo
good.
Fasogbin and Bevan Rod, très bien. Excellent stuff. El Presidente is pleased. We hope to see you in the council chambers in the not too distant future. And as always, Rory, the end of DPRFR signals Q and A.
Q&A. And I've got a question for you, David.
Oh.
Something that came to mind It's a bit of a dual question, I suppose. I had two thoughts whilst watching Newcastle against Sale, and I'm only ever capable of two thoughts, so I was really at my maximum capacity.
Yeah, I imagine there was a bead of sweat dropping from the forehead.
There's always a bead of sweat dropping from the forehead.
No, but a second bead of sweat.
It was chasing the first.
Yeah.
So I had two thoughts watching it, because I was trying to think, how would you increase the crowd size for both those teams, really, two teams that struggle with getting a big enough crowd. And my first thought was, are their stadiums not central enough? Are they too a little bit out in the sticks? My second one was, would moving their games to, ideally Friday night would be the night for them, but failing that, could we start considering maybe a Thursday night or a Monday night game to give them the opportunity to draw in players from the local area that wouldn't be otherwise engaged for their local clubs of the weekend?
Good question. So yeah, as you said, there's 2 points here. There's whether those clubs are ideally situated to kind of capture fans, and two, are the games played at an appropriate time? On the first point, I think I'm not 100% certain on the geography of Salford or Newcastle, but I know from watching on telly, it certainly doesn't seem like they're in the middle of the hubbub and built-up residential areas with a lot of people on the doorstep who are able to just amble on by.
No, I mean, to paint a bit of a word picture on it, so that Sale are on the outskirts of Trafford Park, which is basically industrial estate, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Not a lot of residency around them. They're right by a motorway, but without actual
transport links.
So Sale, I think, are particularly poorly situated in reality. Newcastle are on the outskirts of the town, but they are connected by the metro.
Okay.
It's not an overly difficult journey to get there without them, but without them actually being a visible presence in the town, because they are a little bit outside.
Okay, so with that helpful backdrop, Newcastle-wise, I don't think that's too much of an issue. Having useful connections to a metro system, you see it in other places where that can work quite well. You said the word metro, and my mind immediately jumps to when I was in Bordeaux for the Rugby World Cup, and how both the stadiums in Bordeaux are actually nowhere near the centre of Bordeaux. You just get there by using the metro, and they clearly do well out there. So I think that's doable for Newcastle. I think perhaps the second point would be a more interesting one for that one. For Sale, I've often heard the story of how tricky it is to get to and how it's just not very well located. Perhaps being more centrally located to kind of try and capture what is quite a sport-loving part of the country.
Or this big regeneration project around Old Trafford, and see if that benefits them. Can they tie themselves into it?
Can they get on the blower to Jim Ratcliffe and see if they can sort something out? But I think the other question you asked around Thursday fixtures or Monday fixtures, there's two schools of thought. All I know is, from a Northampton Saints fan perspective, whenever a game is released, whenever the fixture's released, and I'm in a number of Saints forums and groups and things, the amount of moaning that takes place for a game that's on a Friday night, let alone a Saturday.
Really?
Yeah, so even though the club says that they really like Friday night games because it's better for business, because you're doing food and drinks business.
Gloucester would have a Friday night game every week. We love a Friday night game.
Yeah. The problem is, I think maybe it's a Northampton thing, because I think a lot of the fans are spread outside of Northampton. The Northampton isn't the largest of places, and it's a fan base built up of being quite spread out. And a lot of people feel Friday night kickoffs are really tricky to get to if you work a normal 9 to 5.
Yeah, okay.
So it depends on the
regional thing.
It depends on the demographic of your fan base, I'd say. If you've got a really strong local support, I think it could work. The question mark is how do you make sure a team is given enough prep time, rest and recovery time between a fixture, say if they're playing on a Saturday or Sunday, then they got a following Thursday game. I guess you'll try and balance it out by having a Friday game to a Thursday game the following week, maybe. So, but all that could be worked out. The other aspect of it is, one thing I know from my time playing rugby, it's amazing how many people who play rugby on a Saturday or a Sunday or whatever don't actually watch rugby or like watching rugby because they've grown up never being able to watch it because the games are always on at the same time. It is a huge... This
is where I think we're suffering as a sport.
It's a huge own goal, yeah.
Because we're competing with our own clubs. Even if you move games to Saturday nights...
Yeah.
you know, but you just give yourself an opportunity for people who actually like the sport to watch it. You know, it's frustrating when you know, as a Premiership Rugby fan who is still an active player, you know, it's quite frustrating when Gloucester are clashing with when I'm actually going to go and put the boots on.
Yeah, I imagine from your perspective as a current person still playing, when you look at the fixture list and you see all the just bog standard Saturday kickoff times, you think, oh, there's more games I'm going to miss.
Exactly.
So I think it feels like there's something there. There's a duty of care aspect about making sure the players are protected from a workload point of view that would need to be figured out. I don't mind it in the sense of it gives the opportunity for the clubs to try and attract different people to the games. Make it a bit of an event if you're playing a Thursday night. I suppose the counter is, are you going to get as many people buying drinks? But I think if
it's Thursdays.
Thursday, yeah, I think that still won't be a problem. I have always been an advocate for trying new things. The sport is trying to figure out new ways forward. Why not throw this into the mix? That's where I'm at.
It just feels worth a try for me. I mean, if you look at the French, the times of their kickoffs,
yeah.
I mean, some of their games don't kick off till like 9 at night.
Yeah.
Which is a very French thing. I'm not saying we should necessarily go quite as late as that. I don't think that would quite work with English sensibilities. But
no,
you know, I think later games will give you some opportunities to get people at the match.
Yeah,
imagine coming from the local club to come and watch a Premiership game afterwards. Having had a couple of beers in the clubhouse.
Imagine if a club had the foresight to arrange a late kickoff on a Saturday for, say, 7, 7:30, 8, which is very doable because it happens in European rugby, and for them to reach out to all the local clubs and do some real good ticket deals.
Just feels like an opportunity to me.
Like, any discounts you're putting on the ticket packages, you're making double back on the bar bill. Put it that way.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something, even if you can't do a Thursday or Monday, put a slightly later Saturday kickoff. Like, it can be done. Hopefully I answered your question satisfactorily there, Rory.
Absolutely.
I don't think we've got any other... Oh, thank you again. I love the feedback. In terms of podcast questions, I think that is all we have for this week. That means, sadly, we move on to the fin.
C'est fini.
Fini, c'est fini, que sera, sera. And that means the jingle. But before we get onto the jingle, Rory, do you have any final words?
Je ne comprends pas, je suis anglais.
And on that confusing note, we will bring the podcast to a close. Hope you've enjoyed listening. This has been episode 12 of Rucks Balls and Oval Balls, and we will be back next week.